of course, Jaden Daniels taken number 2 overall in this year's draft. The quarterback taken number 1 overall will have a new head coach next season. Caleb Williams will be being coached by Ben Johnson, the sensational offensive coordinator whose rise with the Detroit Lions over the last couple of years has been a sight to behold. And I'm delighted to say that joining us now from CHGO and all sorts of other brilliant coverage across Chicago, Adam Hoge is with us. Adam, how are you doing, brother?
I'm good, Will. A lot of excitement in the last 24 hours here about this hire. The Bears going out and getting seemed like the biggest fish in this coaching carousel, Ben Johnson.
I watched a little bit of your emergency pod last night in bed at about 11 at night. That's the kind of human being I am, Adam. You have to say, the excitement, you said a lot of it felt like half of the building piled into the studio to watch what you guys had to say because people were so hyped. And look, for years, there's been this weird cycle with the Bears of draft a quarterback, only give them a year with a head coach, get a new head coach. They don't like the quarterback. It's never quite married up. Do you feel like finally we've got the marriage that you desperately want?
Well, I think so. I think you look at it and I understand you guys were just talking about Jaden Daniels and what he's doing is unbelievable. But I mean, if you do go back to last spring, it was pretty close to unanimous that Caleb Williams was the top prospect. And so now you're going through this coaching cycle, and at least from an offensive standpoint, I mean, you could argue, compare Ben Johnson to Mike Vrabel, who was technically the bigger coach to get, but from an offensive standpoint, there was no question that was Ben Johnson. He's been the best play caller in the NFL over the last 3 years. Statistically, his team's number 1 in EPA per play over that time period. So if you just look at it from that perspective, you're getting the number 1 quarterback prospect. Now you're getting the number 1 coaching prospect. Obviously, no one ever knows how it's going to actually play out. But in terms of process, it's hard to argue with what the Bears did here. And it's really, talking about the Bears cycle that they keep ending up in. This is unlike the Bears. It's unlike them to go out and so aggressively get this guy before he even does an in-person interview. His first time at the Bears facility will be today when he gets there, if he's not already there this morning. So that's different. Spending what sounds like it's about $15 million is different per year for a head coach. And so I think that's what's part of this excitement too, is just the Bears operated differently in this circumstance. It's the first time, guys, I can remember I didn't have to go to Wikipedia to look up a coaching prospect. There's guys but you still need to look up their resume. We know Ben Johnson at this point. Pretty much everyone does with what he's done with the Lions.
I mean, so you watched Caleb Williams all last year. You mentioned the talent. You mentioned that, in the draft, and I agree with you, it was consistent. I mean, nobody was sitting out there like Jaden Daniels is going to go number 1, there wasn't even a debate. It was the Caleb Williams draft. And Caleb Williams, if you looked at the numbers, if you didn't know he played for the Chicago Bears, he was good last year. He was overall he was good, but he has to be better. Part of it's on him, but they hired Ben Johnson for one reason, to get the best out of Caleb Williams. What did you see with Ben with the Lions that's going to make it work so well theoretically with Caleb Williams? How does he get USC Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams with the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's another interesting part of this hire is that he's coming from within the division. So this is obviously a team and an offense that we're very familiar with, seeing the Lions twice a year. And from the other side, Ben Johnson, if there's going to be questions about how he can oversee a whole team and overlook a defense, even though he's the offensive, play caller at the same time, but he knows this defensive roster intimately from game planning against the Bears. And it's been interesting to watch those chess matches a little bit, because the Bears have actually given Ben Johnson some trouble in those games. The Bears have played the Lions closer than a lot of these other teams have, despite losing, I think, all of those games. They've been some good matchups. So I think from what I've looked from the Lions, just the fact that he uses pre-snap motion the way he does to put a quarterback in an advantageous position to understand what they're looking at, helping the quarterback diagnose the play, right? Now, on the other end of that, Caleb Williams, if there's an area where he needs to improve, he's going to have to be able to get a lot better at understanding what he's looking at and making the right decisions, because that's where I think Jared Goff, with his experience, is undoubtedly, better at this point in his career. So if Ben Johnson's trying to create the picture for him at the line of scrimmage and putting, 3 guys in motion to the point that Jared Goff's able to see, oh, I know exactly what I'm looking at, and he can check to the right thing, that's where Caleb still needs to get better because, look, he put up numbers. He looks awesome. The physical tools are all there, but he didn't always diagnose things the best at the line of scrimmage. He also didn't have a lot of help around him. His offensive line's not very good. So they got to upgrade a lot of things around him too. But he definitely has weapons to work with, and the raw talent with Caleb is definitely there. So I'm excited to see what Ben Johnson can do with a quarterback who's got all of Jared Goff's arm strength, if not more, but can also move around. There's so many more things that he can do with them.
My favorite joke from the last 2 days has been that Ben Johnson watched Jaden Daniels pull apart his Lions team and is basically going to go to the Bears to make Caleb Williams better than Jaden Daniels out of spite. Because let's not forget, that's a job he turned down 12 months ago.
Yeah,
he could have been Jaden Daniels' head coach. The other element to it, because we're going to sit here and analyse it, and as a Bears fan who's gone through a tough time for a lot of that last decade I talked about, yes, you want to look at actually, what are the results going to be? But at the end of the day, this is the guy who had the stumble play against you guys, right? This is a guy who has a bag of tricks as wild as anyone in the NFL. You've got to be excited about it just being fun again this year.
Oh, without a doubt. He even had as many good play calls as he's had against the Bears. He had one that I actually thought was terrible when he had Penei Sewell try to throw the ball. I think that was on the Thanksgiving matchup, and it was just like almost arrogant because they were just pounding the ball down the field on the Bears defense at that point. They couldn't stop anything, and here he's got his tackle throwing the ball, and he's fortunate that it didn't turn into a turnover. And obviously we saw the other night too, he got a little bit greedy maybe with Jameson Williams, and that one backfired. So they're not all going to be perfect, but man, it's going to be refreshing to have some creativity again. And to have aggressiveness again as well, because the Bears haven't always been aggressive, and I don't know if they've been up to speed analytically over the recent years. So all of that is exciting for the Bears. However, I think we all understand he doesn't have the same offensive line. There's going to be some growing pains for both Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. So just because he's been able to run all these awesome plays with the Lions doesn't mean he's going to be able to do it right away unless, and that's going to be the next thing we start talking about here in Chicago pretty much immediately, is upgrading the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, but especially on that offensive line.
So to upgrade the line of scrimmage, which 100%, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, that's not so much Ben Johnson. That's a job of a general manager, right? Which brings us to the elephant in the room, because the Bears, they've obviously been the best run organization in the NFL for years now. Everybody knows that. Ryan Poles, I mean, I'm not the world's biggest Bears fan, but if I go on social media, if I'm reading blogs, if I'm keeping up with stuff, I don't see anybody that likes him.
The conversation was about this job was that Ben Johnson wasn't necessarily going to take this job because he didn't like the power dynamic with Kevin Warren, with Ryan Poles.
That's what I get at. And you have Kevin Warren, you have the stadium issues. How does this, and he just got the job, but you're in Chicago. This is a real media market. I'm sure everyone's talking about this. How do you think it works out with Ryan and the GM? Because I've covered enough NFL teams, and you can have the quarterback and the head coach and all these things, but if you don't have the front office power dynamic right, none of it works.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting. And the next big thing I think we'll learn in the next 24 hours is whether or not Ryan Poles, the general manager, is getting a contract extension, because it's our understanding that right now he only has 1 year left on that original deal he signed with the Bears. So if he gets that contract extension, I think that's a pretty good sign that he and Ben Johnson sold each other on their partnership and they feel good about things going forward. And if not, if they're treating this more like a 1 year experiment where that puts Ben Johnson, I think, in a little bit more of a powerful position, because he's obviously not going to go anywhere after 1 year. So that'll be the next big clue I think we get. But I had always heard guys during this coaching search that from Ben Johnson's perspective, he did not view Ryan Poles as a roadblock. Was he possibly intrigued by the idea of being able to go to Las Vegas and hire his own general manager and work with Tom Brady? Absolutely. I think that's why the Raiders made a big push. But at the end of the day, I think it was maybe Kevin Warren, the team president, that there was more questions about who's exactly in charge. We'll learn a little bit more maybe in the next few days about some of those conversations. At this point, we haven't even talked to Ben Johnson. He hasn't been formally introduced. But I don't think he takes this job unless the Bears were able in the interview process or back channel conversations to answer all those questions that he might have had. Remember, this came down to a 3-hour Zoom interview and then back channel conversations and negotiations. I mean, that was it. There was no in-person interview. This guy had a 3-hour Zoom call. Obviously, I think this has been going on for a while, though, behind the scenes, probably from the moment the Bears lost that game in Detroit on Thanksgiving when the clock literally ran out on Matt Eberflus. I think Ben Johnson was their number one target.
And look, when you look at what it means for the division, for the NFC North, the best division in football right now, we expect, whatever the quarterback situation looks like, we do think the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell will bounce back from their disappointment. The Lions, we'll get to in a moment, but, the Packers, we think there is still enough talent there. We like the coaching, right? So he's coming into a tough situation, but a tough situation he knows. How much is the appeal of this, the fact that not only are you getting this brilliant offensive mind, but there is, as you mentioned, the brain drain within division as well, and that it's kind of resetting that playing field, which right now is already a pretty wild one?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he just knows the personnel within the division, and all his opponents so well and has had success beating all of these teams too. If I were to ask you guys who was the fourth best coach in the division behind the three head coaches on the Packers, Vikings, and Lions, who's the next best coach in the division, you would have said Ben Johnson. The offense coordinator for the Lions.
I might have taken Ben Johnson above Matt LaFleur, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you can make that argument already, possibly. But the point is that fourth person definitely wasn't on the Bears, and so they probably went out and got that next best guy that's already in the division and made them the head coach. So that now, Will, you can have that debate about is he already better than Matt LaFleur? And so I think that's another reason why it's so exciting. The fact that they can jump right in. There's no learning curve. I don't think it's the biggest hurdle, but when you hire a coach from the other conference, especially when you only see these teams every 4 years, it does make a difference. You got to put more work into learning your opponents, especially when you're an offensive head coach who's calling the plays and not just one of those CEO types. So I think that's a major advantage and one of the real big bonus factors that the Bears get in this hire.
Brilliant stuff. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want
to
really
quick, what is it? I've been to Chicago a billion times. I love city Chicago. Bears fans, I feel for them. What is it like to be a Bears fan right now? You get Caleb Williams, and you get the coach that nobody thought you were going to get in January in Chicago. I feel like this is like an episode of The Bear where everyone's happy and singing along, and they're not fighting in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's cold right now. That's what it feels like. It's -6 Fahrenheit, which I think converts to like a -billion in Celsius for you guys. It's exciting though. Because getting back to kind of how we started this conversation, this just isn't how the Bears usually operate. They don't usually go get the big fish. They get the guy you sort of have to talk yourself into, and you give them less money. And so the fact that you kind of got this no-brainer hire that turned down jobs. I mean, another way to look at it is he chose the Bears, right?
Over Tom Brady. He chose the Bears over Tom Brady.
Yes. Look, the Bears couldn't beat Tom Brady at all. The only win they had against Tom Brady his entire career was when Tom Brady, if you guys remember, forgot how many downs there were. He forgot his fourth down in that Bucs game at Soldier Field. So his record against the Bears now falls to 6-2 all time. So this is easily the biggest victory the Bears ever got against Tom Brady.
Brilliant stuff, Adam. Superb. We'll see you on Radio Row in New Orleans, right?
I'll see you in a couple weeks. Always
Beautiful
great talking
stuff.
to you guys.
Can't wait to see you, man. And we'll learn a lot more about that situation
Good stuff.
in Chicago when we're out there. So I'm sure we'll catch up with Hoge when we arrive in New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. talkSPORT End Zone are going to be there. We are going to have so much great content. We'll be doing this show from there. We'll be doing the rundown. We'll do a big Super Bowl preview. We're going to have interviews galore. It's going to be unreal.